When the coalition government came to power 5 years ago, some experts were asking if Britain had once again become the sick man of Europe. Prime Minister David Cameron prescribed a mix of spending cuts, tax hikes and a public sector pay freeze. Well, now the recession is over. Growth stood at 2.8% last year. According to the OECD, that's faster than any other G7 country. But is Britain really booming again? Well, house prices are up, boosting consumer confidence. And unemployment is down to 5.6%. That's the lowest level since July 2008. So far, so good. And all this amid the coalition's austerity drive. Sumaya Keynes is from Britain's leading economic think tank, the Institute for Fiscal Studies.
Well, in 2009-10, borrowing was around 10% of the economy. What the government did is it took some quite painful decisions. It largely reduced borrowing through cuts to public spending, and there were some tax increases. And obviously, the impact of those changes has meant lower benefits for some households and higher taxes paid by others. In the short run, if you cut spending or increase taxes, then that might act as a drag on the economy. But if you hadn't done anything, then the public finances wouldn't have been on a sustainable path.
The IFS says whoever forms the next government will have to finish the job of reducing borrowing back to sustainable levels. But what about the borrowing habits of ordinary people? The Bank of England says unsecured debt rose to £239 billion last year, or €333 billion. It was £234 billion in 2008, the year the financial crisis struck the UK. It's a potentially lethal cocktail of low interest rates, student debt, cheap loans and credit cards.
Beneath a lot of this growth, we can see that the engine's not particularly firing on all cylinders. A lot of this is driven by consumption. People still, or a large proportion of the population, have still got houses that they bought which they've made an enormous amount of profit on. This has made them happier to go out and spend a little more than they perhaps should do. And if we look at things like business investment, which allows us to grow in the future rather than just now, that's not picking up at the rate that we would hope it has. And also there are still concerns, significant concerns about the rate of productivity of the UK economy.
And yet again, the UK's business and financial services sector has helped Britain to grow once more. Last year, services accounted for 79% of the country's economic output. Now, Britain has long had a dominant services sector, and that figure is roughly the same in France. It's a trend that's been reflected across the Western world as manufacturers look to produce more cheaply elsewhere. But one of the coalition government's big promises was to rebalance the economy so the country wasn't overly reliant on the world of finance. Some lament that Britain doesn't make things anymore, but manufacturing actually accounts for 10% of the economy. Brands have just moved upmarket and upscale, employing less people in the sector than before. Brompton Bicycle sells 45,000 bikes a year, 80% of them overseas. Its managing director says the government's rebalancing act will take time.
People imagine in business, some bloke turns up, they pay him about £1 million, and suddenly he's meant to fix a company in about 6 months. And they say the same about politicians. They rock up and we want it all sorted in 2 years or 5 years. It's complete tosh. To turn the British economy round from a manufacturing economy that was squeezed, there was no interest in the 70s and 80s in manufacturing. That was somebody else's job, not the UK's job. There is a feeling now, cross-party feeling, thanks to JLR, in fact, who are shoving a whole load of money into the British coffers, where the parties are going, hey-ho, this manufacturing malarkey is great. Look how much money we're making. We can do more of this. So there is a recognition, but we've got a problem. There aren't enough people studying it. The whole infrastructure isn't there. The supply chain isn't there. There's no magic wand. It'll take a generation to bring it back.
So the next Prime Minister is going to face some pretty big economic challenges. Further spending cuts could choke one of the main sources of growth in the British economy. And with the Eurozone debt crisis still casting a shadow over Britain's main export market, there's still a long way to go before the next government can say the recovery has been fully secured.